This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Ruben Jansen. The show is always live and it's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. Don't forget we're also on YouTube right now with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now today, we look at final election results that's in this weekend from Burundi that has given Pierre Nkurunziza a controversial third term in office there. The city of Cape Town has a new weapon, they say, to combat gangsterism. Then, our question of the day asks of you, are we sitting on an Uber time bomb here in South Africa? Now later on, we'll get the views of both metered taxis and Uber drivers as the service continues to run amongst much unhappiness here in South Africa. We close the show with a look at volunteerism and the possible economic impact it can have in this country. But first, let's get today's news from Anine.
Good morning, I'm Anine Domal. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. The Ministers of Police and Public Works will have to give more explanation on upgrades at the President's home in Nkandla. This is according to the chairperson of Parliament's Nkandla Ad Hoc Committee, Cedric Frolick. The committee discovered that the upgrades at the President's private homestead were not worth 246 million rand. About 30 journalists got to see firsthand the multi-million rand upgrades. They were taken on a tour in Nkandla after Editors Forum SANEF lodged a complaint that media were denied access during Parliament's Ad Hoc Committee's inspection. The 9 policemen accused of killing Mozambican taxi driver Mido Macia are expected to take the stand. The group will be going on trial for his murder today. 2 years ago, a video of Macia being dragged behind a police van went viral. His body was found hours later in a police holding cell. In Somalia, it's been reported that the Chinese embassy worker died in the Somalia blast that claimed the lives of around 13 people. Militant group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for the devastating explosion. More than 40 were wounded at a hotel near an airport in Mogadishu. The attack on the Jazeera Hotel happened before US President Barack Obama left Kenya. Barack Obama has arrived in Ethiopia. The US President is scheduled to hold talks with senior government officials and African Union Commission Chairperson Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Before he left Kenya, Obama made a strong case for women's empowerment in Africa. He challenged the continent to shun outdated cultures that marginalized women. Obama also warned that the continent would lag behind in economic development if women were not included in decision-making and girls are left out of school. Meanwhile, Kenyans are hopeful that the US President's visit to their country will yield results. Obama concluded his visit to the country, calling upon Africa's leadership to shun corruption and embrace equality. And Buccaneers supporters have a reason to smile this morning. Thabo Rakale scored a brilliant goal as Orlando Pirates beat CS Oxine 1-0 in a CAF Confederation Cup clash in Tunisia. The result leaves the Sea Robbers second in Group B with 6 points from 3 matches, 3 points behind Egyptian giants Zamalek. Well, remember you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, over to you.
Thank you, Anine. Now, Burundi's President Pierre Nkurunziza has won a controversial third term in office, as was expected. He received nearly 70% of votes in last Tuesday's election, according to the Electoral Commission there. Most opposition leaders boycotted the polls, but their names remained on the ballots. Main opposition leader Agathon Rwasa has won almost 19% of the vote. More than 100 people died in protests since April, when the ruling party announced Nkurunziza would seek a third term. The demonstrations triggered an attempted coup in May that was quickly put down by forces loyal to Nkurunziza. Now, for the latest on the outcome of the elections, we are joined from Pretoria by Professor Kaleboga Mapunye, an analyst from Wippold Brigalia Bam, Chair in Electoral Democracy in Africa. He's also with the Department of Political Sciences. the College of Human Sciences at the University of South Africa, also known as UNISA here in South Africa. Very good morning to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Very good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me, Eben.
Professor, just give me your reaction to the elections. Firstly, I would think the fact that it took place and then the outcome.
My overall impression is that an election has been held, and if we are to go only by the numbers that you have mentioned, 70%, is a very huge, a high number, significant in statistical terms. And the fact that there was no, violence on election day or significant violence on election day, one, I suppose, could say that, that's as far as one can, comment about the electoral process. But if we look at the credibility of that election, as well as the legitimacy that one would like to look at once every election has been held, I suppose we cannot say much. The results or the outcome was clearly disappointing for election management, and especially the promotion of democratic elections in the continent.
What does it mean, the result and the election, for the region there? We know there have been strife. Burundi itself have gone through a difficult couple of decades to emerge now. The Great Lakes region, what do you think this will mean the next decade for that area? Are we going to see a lot more conflict?
There are a number of, complicated and complex scenarios that we can read into this. Clearly, as I have mentioned, obviously, if the legitimacy of, the new government for the next 5 years, assuming that is going to be going on, for that period, because the opposition were saying that they want, a re-election. So we don't know what's going to pan out. But assuming that the newly elected government is in power for that period, clearly is going to be, having a very, low legitimacy in my view. And I don't know how, obviously, Burundi is now going to be treated by, the regional, countries as well as the African Union itself. But in terms of, long-term peace and political stability, that is also quite a worrisome, factor, given the fact that we are talking about a very volatile region here, Rwanda just as a neighbor, and the fact that, even up as we were, the results were being, just about to be counted this week, MSF or the Doctors Without Borders were reporting that people are still, running away from Burundi. So we have, these huge numbers of people in the neighboring countries, and it doesn't bode well for security long term, especially given the fact that we are aware about the tensions, that have been there before that, ceasefire was signed in 2000.
Now, that ceasefire that came in 2000, there was another accord 2005. The Americans came out late last week. They say they see the country teetering on the brink of civil war. Do you expect things to deteriorate and the country to slip back into civil war in the months to come?
Well, I wouldn't say in the months to come, but clearly we are looking at political tensions here. We have to be to acknowledge the fact that even ceasefire. By the way, it was also marred by controversy because, as in any negotiation system, you don't always get what you want, and you don't always get all the the credible warring sides to a conflict participating. Others will boycott and so on. So there are issues clearly with that agreement. But in terms of what the country is facing right now, we have a volatile situation in the sense that those people who have run out of the country are still outside the country. And it's also another situation whereby the institutions that could be supporting, the democratic process in the country are also seemingly weak. I'm talking here about parliament. I'm talking here about the judiciary. You need a situation where even civil society, many of the civil society organizations were complaining about human rights abuses. So this is, an explosive mix of issues which might just undermine, stability, not only in Burundi but also in the region.
I want to ask you about sanctions. The European Union have come out. They say they've imposed sanctions. What would that mean for the country economically if it is turned into somewhat of a pariah state within the region? And also, if you can maybe add to that, what do you think the role of the AU should be going forward?
Sanctions are always not a very good, instrument to be applied on a country, because clearly it cuts off the lifeline, the lifeblood, the essential, wherewithal, the necessary items that a country needs, especially in economic terms. So sanctions would be the last issue that Burundi would actually be expecting. But unfortunately, that's what the EU and other European leaders have talked about, of imposing sanctions. So clearly that would obviously stifle the country. It might mean that the country is going to be really struggling, especially when you don't have people who are supposed to be injecting the necessary economic and financial resources into the country. The AU, I think, could obviously engage the country, as they have done. I think they are doing that. They have been doing that even in the run-up to the elections, and this is why I suppose that they were reluctant even in sending observers. So one would expect not only the AU but the East African community leaders to come to Burundi, negotiate and find out how they could resolve the current impasse or political dilemma, because clearly it doesn't bode well for long-term security in the region.
Prof, I thank you for joining us tomorrow. That is Professor Kalebo Hamapunye, who's an analyst with Whipple, Brigadier BAM, Chair in Electoral Democracy in Africa. He's also with the Department of Political Studies or Sciences at the University of South Africa. Now, the story, of course, Burundi's main opposition leader has now denounced the third consecutive term by President Pierre Nkurunziza, and he's demanded fresh elections. Here are some of your views. Lots of different views on social media. Harun Tasa says, how soon will Nkurunziza be sworn in? Some think it will happen very soon. No sense in waiting too long, talking about the Burundi crisis. Keti Nivambandi says, one great thing about Burundi crisis is the level of political awareness in our youth. We're breeding a new and fierce generation of leaders. Looking at the upside. Joseph Prince Adoko says, it's a curse, or is it just greed overpowering our judgment? Hashtag Burundi elections at African leaders, says Joseph. Those are some of the views. There are quite a few of them. You can, of course, interact with us directly if you want to on our Twitter page. Give us your views. We love it. We'll put it up. Of course, don't forget our question of the day. A little bit later, we're dealing with Uber. Are we sitting on an Uber time bomb here in South Africa? We've seen isolated incidents of intimidation and, in some cases, violence. What do you think of the Uber time bomb that is on the streets here in South Africa right now, and elsewhere in the world as well, mind you? Now we move on. The City of Cape Town and the Western Cape Government launched a special law enforcement stabilization unit to deal with gangsterism on the Cape Flats. The unit was introduced to the media at a ceremony in the Vygieskraal Stadium in Athlone over the weekend. The stabilization unit consists of 90 members from the expanded Public Works program. The unit has received extensive training that will enable them to perform policing in areas where there are high levels of violence. They will be deployed in gang-ridden suburbs such as Manenberg, Bishop Lavis, Ottery and Hanover Park. The launch follows the announcement of a multi-million-rand urban transformation plan for Manenberg by the Mayor Patricia de Lille to focus on major infrastructure investment. Now, the City of Cape Town's Mayoral Committee member for Safety and Security, Jean-Pierre Smith, who's also known as JP, joins us from Cape Town. Very good morning to you, JP. Thanks for joining us once again.
Morning.
Just tell us about this ambitious plan to kind of deal with this never-ending problem of gangsterism and gang violence on the Cape Flats.
Well, at the moment, gang violence and murders relating to it contribute about a fifth of our murder rate in Cape Town. It's what pushes us to the top of the stack, and we're very keen to impact on this. At the moment, also, we see that the mechanisms that should be taking these gangsters out of the equation, the criminal justice system, simply fails at that. We have a 2% conviction rate for gang-related murder and attempted murder, and on that basis, the gangsters just keep on going. So over time, the city has started to assemble all the bits and pieces that will allow us to drive really comprehensive programs to quell gang violence. 2 years ago, you'll remember the Teachers Down tools in Manenberg saying it was too violent to work, and we got law enforcement deployed in large numbers. We repeated that exercise last year, and we showed that we could. But every time we took those staff away from other neighborhoods who quickly started to complain, now we have 90 extra staff dedicated only for this purpose. And I'm hoping that with this, we'll be able to start making a lasting dent in some of our worst affected suburbs, starting with Manenberg. And in another week or two, we'll announce a very specialized operation that will see us digging very deep into Manenberg and really taking a big swipe at crime, including a very prosecutorially focused attention in addition to what the stabilization unit does.
What's the difference between the stabilization unit and the gang unit that we know?
Well, thank you. Very important question. Gang unit is a specialized unit. They gather intelligence. They gather crime information, and they target specific persons. They're prosecutorially driven. Their job is to go and raid particular properties, find guns and ammunition and drugs, and try and cripple the gang economy. But that doesn't stop the random intermittent shooting. Their numbers aren't large enough to be there every single day. The stabilization unit does just that. They stabilize. So it's saturation policing, going in large numbers, occupy the public open space around schools, around the CBD, and around busy corridors, make sure it's safe in the mornings and afternoons before and after school, make sure that we do random searches, random stop and search, random vehicle checkpoints, and focuses around the known gang properties and drug properties so that we interrupt that business trade. So it's a large numbers, labor-intensive operation. It is effectively what Fiela does, but Fiela does a hit-and-run strategy because they've got so many targets. We're going to try and really just dig into one suburb and stay there and make a bit difference so that the gangs learn. Every time they cause trouble, the stabilization unit shows up and we cause them serious pain.
Now, we've seen the Premier making a special appeal to residents of especially Manenberg to work with authorities in the fight against the gangs. How do we get the communities to buy in? We know that they live in constant fear. These kinds of units can only, and all kinds of crime prevention strategies can only really happen with the buy-in of the communities. How do we get them on board?
It's a legitimate point. You're right. Your crime intelligence is as good as your informants. We get about 25 tip-offs a week at the moment, and obviously we want to increase that. That will increase when people have trust in us, and the quality of the tip-offs will increase. We also pay informants, so not everybody you get information from is a good person who volunteers the information, but some people you have to induce that offering of information, and we do that as well, and that has driven much of our successful results. I mean, we've multiplied by a factor of 8 the arrests and gang-related arrests we've gotten in the last few years over what we used to get. And we've seen, significant closures of drug factories, big busts in excess of 2 million rand, and the number of guns we took off in the last 5 months of last year exceeded what we had done, before 2006 in 6 years. So we've gotten a lot sharper, but it does depend on community input. And part of that will be that the stabilization unit will start going door to door, introducing themselves, and that we will win the trust of the people. I've already had a complaint that maybe our members were a bit rough on Friday. They must understand they serve the public of Manenberg, the good people, and that we must get those people on board. We must get to the point where they trust us, where they see that we are on their side and not treating them the same as the gangsters. So that's a thing that we have to focus on and develop. We must get the public to have the level of trust in us that they're willing to share info.
We see gang leaders on the Cape Flats almost have celebrity status amongst those communities. They have free reign in those communities and reign by terror. How are we going to now see the end or the honeymoon period for those gang leaders being over? Are we going to see gang leaders being targeted specifically?
Well, that's exactly what the Gang and Drug Task Team does, and we're increasingly working with asset and forfeiture and others. That is absolutely the target. It is sad that we have to reinvent some of the wheel because, these are already services national government should be rendering, but the conviction rate as it is proves that is not happening. So the city is trying to replicate much of that, and the kind of success that they had with George Thomas, or Geweld as he's known, we need to multiply that by 50. There are many other people like him who need to be taken out of the equation so that these communities can breathe again and that the social environment, the economic environment in these communities can normalize and investment can happen. So we need to see national government repeat that many times, but watch this space over the next month. You'll see us step into many of those gaps and a distinct and sustained focus on some of these gang leaders, very sustained, of the kind that they will not be able to avoid. and that will teach them that disrupting the community, harming people, killing is very counterproductive for their business. First prize, national government takes them out of the equation, and only they have the power to do it. But in the absence of that, the city will cause them as much grief as possible and make sure that they don't get to undertake their activities in an unhindered way.
I thank you for joining us today, talking about gang violence, the ever or never-ending issue of gang violence on the Cape Flats. That was JP Smith, who's the Mayoral Committee member for Safety and Security. He says, well, now they're going to target the gang leaders themselves. They're going to get the communities to buy in. What do you think? At SABC Newsroom, is it another mirage? I don't know. We need all the action we can because communities are being affected. Children can't some days go to school. Lots of collateral damage within the crossfire of a constant gang war. Now let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe. We start in the United Kingdom. The Independent reports that at least 13 people are feared to have been killed following a blast at a hotel in Mogadishu. Then moving to China, the South China Morning Post says a man tried to start a fire on board a Shenzhen Airlines flight yesterday but was restrained by cabin crew and passengers, mainland Chinese civil aviation authorities said. Finally, in Europe, the Times talks about Chris Froome, who rode into history on the Champs-Élysées yesterday as he became the first British rider to win the Tour de France twice and the third British winner in 4 years. Well, here in South Africa, we don't say he's British. He was born in Kenya, but he lives in South Africa. He still has a house in Parkhurst here in Johannesburg, so we'll claim him, but the British can pay for him. Anyhow, let's take a look at what's happening around the country here in South Africa. In Johannesburg, with a trial of 9 policemen accused of killing Mozambican taxi driver and immigrant Mido Masia after dragging him behind a police van in Davidson 2 years ago. It's expected to begin in the North Gauteng High Court shortly, actually. In Bloemfontein, the sentencing of fraudster and thief Leanne Greyling, is expected to continue in the regional court there. Greyling was found guilty on 12 charges of fraud and 12 of theft in April of this year after pleading guilty. The charges are related to luxury motor vehicles and spares imports for her clients. Now, before we go to a break, Bobby Christina Brown, the only child of late singer Whitney Houston, died yesterday at the tender age of 22. This after she was diagnosed with irreversible brain damage following an accident in her Atlanta home 6 months ago. The daughter of R&B singer Bobby Brown was found face down and unresponsive in a bathtub in a home by her partner and a friend on 31st of January. The family moved her into hospice care in June. Bobby's death comes 3 years after her Grammy-winning mother, Whitney Houston, who had battled substance abuse, drowned in a bathtub in a Beverly Hills hotel at the age of 48. What a tragic story. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back after a short break.
Several thousand migrants are adrift in boats in Southeast Asian seas.
The refugees have been abandoned at sea by human smugglers with little food and water.
The UN has appealed to the governments of Thailand, Indonesia and Malaysia to act quickly to avert a massive humanitarian crisis.
Leaders will meet in Dar es Salaam on Wednesday to discuss the political crisis in Burundi.
At least 19 people have been killed and more than 200 wounded during violent protests against President Nkurunziza's bid for a third term.
Primetime News, daily at 6 p.m.
Taxi! The days of yelling for a taxi and seeking out a driver are slowly dwindling, all thanks to the new kid on the block, Uber. We live in a competitive world where technology reigns supreme. Not conforming with the times can leave you in the Stone Age. Are we seeing signs of a territorial dispute brewing? In our pursuit to uncover the facts, we had to hear both sides of the story. I first approached a meter taxi driver. He confirmed that their business, their livelihood, is being threatened by Uber. But for more information, I had to speak to one of their spokesmen. The idea was to get an interview with someone, but they kept brushing me off. However, the encounter did reveal the emotion, the anger, the betrayal, and the letdown these guys are feeling.
We just feel forsaken that nobody is caring for us.
Because they are treating us like we are not a human being. So whereas they are there because of us, we are voting for them. So now the Uber is operating. Uber has got millions and dollars, and that's why we got nothing, you see.
So we haven't had any discussion with the giving.
We don't know nothing. We are just.
We know nothing. They can do as they wish. Uber can operate as he wishes. Yeah. He said he's not going to wait for any law.
So how's that affecting you guys?
Because we got corrupt government, that's why.
So you started the business. That's exactly.
It's growing. It comes to the wise.
The wise now.
Wise.
Uber just because it's the whole world. So Martin worldwide.
Understanding or seeing it from their point of view, meter taxi drivers in their minds are backed into a corner. They don't have the resource to take control of the situation, and for most people or human beings, the blame game is the simplest solution to get closure and to voice fear. With the Uber taxi drivers being on the receiving end of their frustration, because the emotion has to go somewhere, and if no one is listening to the meter taxi drivers, things could escalate. Uber have jumped into a controversial dynamic in South Africa, the transport and commuting industry. They don't directly refer to themselves or their business as a taxi service, rather a mobile app that happens to provide a means of transport or public collection, which facilitates at the same time a means of self-employment and a platform for people to make extra money. And this is where the Uber driver comes in. Uber drivers are not waking up every morning chanting war cries, "Today we're going to take over the world. Today we are going to put the meter taxi service out of business." No. They wake up, they put their suit and their tie on with one goal in mind. I'm going to go out there and make it happen for me and my family and put food on the table. But to do that, are they putting their lives at risk?
So one of our guys was beaten by lots of people.
Oh no.
And he was like trying to ask and find out exactly what was happening.
Yes.
They said, "You Uber guys, you taking our clients." I was like, how? Because look, it's just like KFC and Chicken Licken. They're both selling chicken. If you feel the spice of Chicken Licken is not good enough for you, you go somewhere else. So similar to us, we just like any other cabs. We're trying to make ourselves better. If a client is not happy, I'm not taking someone's. I'm waiting for somebody who's going to call the office, and the office will call me to go and pick him up.
Who is right? Who is wrong? And will innocent commuters be caught in the crossfire?
Yeah, that is a legitimate question. Of course, I must point out to you, nobody wanted to appear on camera, as you could see throughout that piece. And furthermore, we tried to get hold of Uber. They're not prepared to talk. Neither is the Meter Taxi Association. We tried to get them in studio. They were non-committal, both sides. The question we asked today, are we sitting on an Uber time bomb here in South Africa? Are we going to see the violence escalate? We've seen incidents of violence thus far. We ask you today, what do you think? Now, Dean Joseph is the guy who went out, spoke to both sides. He's a freelance journalist. Let's look at the country's Uber struggle, as it were. Now, Dean, I want to ask you, we see that nobody's prepared to appear on camera. Do you expect this situation to bubble over into all-out violence on the streets shortly, or is there a modicum of restraint?
What we find out at the moment is that, first of all, both parties not wanting to appear on camera for sake of implications, safety concerns as well. There's been retaliation from the Meter Taxi Service Association or drivers against Uber drivers. So that's where you could say the build-up is starting to happen. That's where the tension, that's the area where the tension is starting to build up. It will be a matter of time before you'll find Uber taxi drivers in their response saying, well, I can't bear to watch my colleagues being assaulted anymore. I can't bear any more intimidation or threats. And I myself will not stand anymore for being intimidated, threatened, or beaten up. So eventually it's going to come to a point where your Uber taxi drivers will retaliate. And yes, very much so. The bubble's going to burst.
Last week we heard a scenario of Uber drivers being so unhappy that there was talk of a strike from today. They were going to picket. Have you heard anything about that? Was there anything
we wanted to get
drivers?
that information. We did interview, but there was no comment. And also the Uber taxi driver that we did interview, he was very adamant and very clear. He said, look, he's received no SMS. He's had no information or details about a strike.
Now, the picture we see here is outside the Gautrain station here in Sandton in Johannesburg, where a lot of the problems have been with assaults and attacks on drivers. Even some members of the public have been followed to pickup points close by.
Yeah.
These gentlemen on screen, are they the sort of guys that look out and wait for you to come out and then they follow you to the cars? Is that how this works at the moment?
I think as far as the meter taxi service drivers are concerned, we're seeing a retaliation because they believe, they feel that Uber is infiltrating or invading their territory.
Yeah.
So they want to teach them a lesson. They want to get them to back off. There are, however, some, you would have seen in the clip as well, what the meter taxi service drivers refer to them as agents.
Yeah.
So there are these security guards, or that's their passive resistance. That's their form of protection.
Yeah, is this Uber? They've Uber now upped the game and put securities stationed around them?
They have at these certain collection and drop-off points, specifically at the Gautrain, where the most incidents have taken place so far.
I understand they blocked the road at Lanseria Airport as well. Was that the case?
That was the case a while back. Things have slowly started to simmer down there. Lanseria have also upped their security as well. We had one of our representatives also go and have a look. And the only feedback that we got there was security was a lot tighter, but it was generally quiet. And they had done that, yes, they had. They'd also the meter taxi service drivers had also reached sort of like their boiling point, and they were forcing the Uber taxi drivers to drop their passengers off somewhere down the road within quite a walking distance to the terminals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what we've been getting as well. Tell me quickly, you've tried to get a hold of Uber themselves and the Meter Taxi Association. We've done the same. Have you had any responses from them? And I know they've been very quiet. Do you know why?
When we went into to Sandton, all right, and to start connecting the dots and just to get the ball rolling, I practically jumped out of the car and started chatting to one of the meter taxi service drivers. And he gave me some information. He confirmed what we've been seeing and sort of the speculation. But he said to me, look, he's not at liberty to actually talk to the press or anybody for that matter. And then directed me to a certain group of people and said, our spokesman there is the person that is now in communication with the press. When we spoke to him as well, he was as tight-lipped as any of them. He said that probably at a higher level, he believes that the situation is being resolved, is being handled, but they don't actually know. And the bottom line is that whatever is going on at the top, it's not filtering down to the guys, not filtering down to the Uber drivers, not filtering down to the meter taxi service drivers either.
That is very dangerous. I think we're sitting on a time bomb. What do you think? Our question of the day is, are we sitting on an Uber time bomb here in South Africa? There it is. Send it to @SABC Newsroom. We run it today. If it's really good, we'll run it tomorrow. And we'll try and get, even if you've got some videos, some pictures, put it up. We'll put it up if it's any good. Dean, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much
and for doing this wonderful look at an emotive story, really, something that affects people's day-to-day lives. The Uber taxi standoff, or the Uber versus meter taxi standoff here in South Africa. It's not just in South Africa where we have that problem. It's a developing problem all around the world right now. Thank you once again, Dean, for coming in and taking us through it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, disturbing story. At least 13 people have been killed and more than 40 others injured in a huge bomb explosion at a hotel in the Somali capital, Mogadishu, yesterday. Yeah, some of the comments coming in. Mogadishu attacks remind me of the work we still need to do in Somalia to curb this. Somalia, Mogadishu, we are one, and we won't stop. Of course, Barack Obama is in that neck of the woods right now, and kind of sends a message, doesn't it? Aziz Salim says terrorists attacked a Somalia hotel, Cameroon and a Nigeria market. Our condolences to the bereaved and a quick recovery to the wounded. DJ Prince Austin says, "Dear Lord, please guide Mogadishu as they are rocked by this terror attack on a major landmark. Also, rest in peace to the souls of the 13 people that died." Redman says, "Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and friends of the horrific attack in Mogadishu. Yes, right now, 13 people confirmed dead, another 40 injured in that explosion in the capital yesterday." Now, for a look at our pick of the day. This one comes from AMB Mohammed Ali Noor. He says, "My sincere thoughts and prayers for today's victims." Talking hashtag Somalia. There is the picture, and what a picture it is. Building completely shredded. 13 dead, 40 people injured. Thus now, let's hope that the death toll does not rise in this instance. Time now for a look at what's happening on Newsroom Facebook page. The National Police Commissioner here in South Africa, Ria Piyecha, strongly disagrees with some of the findings of the Marikana report. Piyecha has released a detailed statement in reaction to the findings and recommendations of the report. Then, US President Barack Obama has arrived in Ethiopia, where he's scheduled to hold talks with senior government officials and the African Union Commission chairperson, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. He will hold official meetings with the Ethiopian Prime Minister, Haile Mariam Desalegn, and President Mulatu Teshome. And then Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton called for a dramatic national shift to energy sources such as solar and wind, setting a goal of generating enough clean, renewable energy to power every US home within a decade after she takes office. For more news, of course, you can put in SABC Newsroom in the search bar on Facebook. Our page pops up. Like it, and we'll send you all the details of what's happening in the world all the time. Time for us to take another break. We'll be back right after this.
The internet has been found to be a tool used by militant groups when recruiting members. This has forced governments to create tighter internet laws. Technology has also been used to call for social change, as was the case with the abducted Nigerian girls.
The people on social media are some of the society's most influential. If they get an issue started, you're likely to have that issue become a national issue.
And on Network, we tell you about this serious side of technology, but we have fun too with gadgets, games and cars. That's Network every Sunday at 19:30, only on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. The Ministers of Police and Public Works will have to give more explanation on upgrades at the President's home in Nkandla. This is according to the chairperson of Parliament's Nkandla Ad Hoc Committee, Shejik Frolick. The committee discovered that the upgrades at the President's private home said were not worth 246 million rand. The 9 policemen accused of killing Mozambican taxi driver Mido Masia are expected to take the stand. The group will be going on trial for his murder today. 2 years ago, a video of Masia being dragged behind a police van went viral. His body was found hours later in police holding cells. And in Somalia, it's been reported that a Chinese embassy worker died in the Somalia blast that claimed the lives of around 13 people. Militant group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for the devastating explosion. More than 40 were wounded at a hotel near an airport in Mogadishu. The attack on the Jazeera Hotel happened before US President Barack Obama left Kenya. Remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Anine. Let's just take a quick look now at a story that's developing down in the Eastern Cape as we speak. The protest against the teacher shortages in the northern areas of Port Elizabeth spilled onto the streets this morning. Disgruntled parents, more than 50 schools in the region blockaded roads leading to and from the northern areas, preventing commuters from going to work. The protest has already led to clashes between protesters and the police. Now, our very own reporter, Iviwe Porti, she is there on the scene. Very good morning to you, Iviwe. Just give us a quick wrap.
Morning, Eben. The roads have been closed since 6:30 this morning in the northern areas. Those are the main roads leading into town and as well as the township, so kind of preventing everyone actually from going to work. This was to be a non-violent type of a protest where parents are just expressing their frustration of the condition that the northern area schools are in, which they have said that they lack teachers. Teachers aren't being paid. Those that are voluntary teachers, they don't have any admin staff, they don't have cleaning staff. So that leaves the condition of the quality of education at a really poor state. But since last week Thursday, there was a meeting between the district as well as the parents, the Northern Areas Forum of Education, those SGBs that stand for the parents as a whole, where the department actually came out to say, it's not them that is stalling the process of having these teachers at school. It's that principals have not given forward the documentation that they need to employ more teachers. But now the protest has become violent. There's a helicopter in the air as we speak. Some police vehicles have been damaged. There's stones being thrown at the vehicles trying to make their way through, as well as police vehicles. Police have also been thrown with stones, and now police to try, they're using stun grenades as well as rubber bullets. I think as we speak now, I'm just trying to move back a bit. The chopper is trying to land. There's people coming through from forests all over. So it is a bit violent as we speak right now, which I don't think was initially supposed to be the case. So we're still on the scene, and we'll just see how things go as the day goes by.
Iviwe, thank you very much for that update. We'll keep you updated as that story develops down in the Eastern Cape. The parents are not happy. It looks like they want to be burning tyres. There are people coming from all over as tensions are very, very high right now. At the top of the hour, we'll try and cross to Iviwe again and have a look as to what happens. We'll have to wait for Elvis and the team to pick up that story. But now, as South Africans continue to honour the late Tata Nelson Mandela's legacy this month by giving back, we ask exactly how volunteerism not only changes the lives of those who need it the most, but how it contributes to the local economy. Here to give us a bit of insight into this is Nedbank's Divisional Executive of Corporate Social Responsibility, Kone Gugushe. Very good morning to you.
Thank you.
And then also in Cape Town, we're joined by the spokesperson for the Little Fighters Cancer Trust, Mandy Erasmus. Very good morning, Mandy. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having us.
If I can start here in the studio in Johannesburg with you, you talk about how important it is to instill a culture of volunteerism from an early age, really amongst people. You say younger people have just as much to contribute to our social fabric. Why do you think young people in South Africa do not volunteer as much as in other countries?
Thank you, Eben. I think there's a number of reasons. Young people's time, I think, has a lot of demands on it, and depending on where they are, there's school demands as well as university or whatever it is that they're studying. But I think that also young people seem to think about always getting paid. Anything that you do, you want to get paid for it, and we need to start moving away from that mindset to say, how do we just instill a culture that says I can give what I can, so that the benefit of other people who do need it, and this will come back to it, almost like a pay it forward kind of mindset.
The culture of making a contribution. You don't always have to benefit, and in the end, the path to happiness is through service, isn't it? It's maybe something that we need to instill in the parent home. But before we go to that point, I just want to go to Mandy in Cape Town. Mandy, now you were the Little Fighter Cancer Trust. You received lots of support from Nedbank's volunteers last week. Just tell us quickly what was done and what was that experience like?
Yes, we were contacted by Nedbank after one of our volunteers enrolled us in a Facebook drive that Nedbank had, and we were offered an amount of 10,000 Rand that we could put towards the work that we do. Now, the work that we do is divided into four areas, which is hospital ward support, individual family support, then also supporting children with cancer in places of safety, and then, of course, raising much-needed childhood cancer awareness, as less than a third of children with cancer in South Africa is actually diagnosed annually. We specifically with Nedbank worked on 3 families, identifying specific needs, making it a bit more interesting and getting them background information on the families. We looked at finer details such as favourite colours, dietary need because of health and because of religious reasons. We took the guys shopping. They did extremely well. They had very strict budgets to stay within. And they actually went over and above what we listed on our list of suggestions for them. And we were going to deliver the goods to the families, but after being briefed by us and after spending the whole day running around, making sure that every family's assistance is practical and is family specific, the volunteers actually volunteered to go and drop it at home with the families that specific day. And that was very special to them. They got to meet the people that they only basically saw their lives written out on paper. They got to spend a bit of time with them. And with one family in the pouring rain, the Nedbank volunteers lay carpeting in their home, which was also a fun activity, because there was a lot of physical activity involved, moving around furniture, measuring, and all in quite a small home. So yes, it was a huge success. And I think the Nedbank volunteers enjoyed seeing what we do day to day on the ground.
Well, Mandy, thank you very much for letting us know about what happened. That's Mandy Erasmus in Cape Town. She's from the Little Fighters Cancer Trust. But I want to wrap up this conversation around volunteerism with you, Quan. I want to talk about the role that parents need to play in bringing up children that want to give. It's not about money, is it? It's about learning to give in a way of yourself somewhat.
Well, if we look at really the legacy of Dada Nelson Mandela and really what he did for this country, it started off, with pro bono work, just the fight against racism and helping out people with that resistance. It's saying, what do I have that I can give to someone else so that it can be for the greater good? So how do we instill that within our own children to say, we are blessed with so many things, whether it's time, whether it's money, or whether it's an ability, a talent, or whatever. But how do we not just use that for our own personal gain, but how do we use that for the greater good of humanity? And this we need to tell it and instill it from a very young age.
It's also a corporate responsibility in a way, isn't it? I see you guys at Nedbank, what you've done is you give your staff 2 days of paid social responsibility leave for them to go out and make a contribution. Now that I think is fantastic, and all businesses should look at that. But how do you encourage other businesses to do that?
Well, I think, it then becomes the trade-off between do I go to work or do I get unpaid leave and not be productive with that time. So it's just saying to corporate South Africa, how do you enable your staff so that they can also do things that are important to them? Because volunteerism is really about finding what is important to you, what is the cause that is important enough for you to be able to go out and do it selflessly. So how do corporates really entrench that within their staff? And we think that a paid corporate social responsibility leave is really a small price to pay.
Well, I would absolutely jump on that one, because I think it's something that we can all chip in to understand what it means to give. I thank you for joining us today. We've run out of time, but it's something that we can actually continue a conversation about, because there's so many other things that you guys are involved with. Thank you for joining us. Quan Gugushe, who is the Divisional Executive of Corporate Social Responsibility with Nedbank. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Now, before we go, Thabo Rakgale scored a superb goal as Orlando Pirates beat CS Sfaxien 1-0 in the CAF Confederation Cup clash in Tunisia last night. Here are some of your comments. Of course, Thabo says, I will always support the boys in good and bad times. Yes, Thabo, that's what you say in front of the people. Boss Lady says, up the Bucks. I'm an extremely proud fan. Orlando Pirates is the one and highly favored by the Almighty God. Amen, sister. Amen. Only you says, I personally think that Mpho Makola brings more than Rakgale. That's my opinion. Well, Rakgale bought the goal that brought the 3 points. So it's kind of self-explanatory, isn't it? Anyhow, I'll leave you with the one and only Bugger for life. Newsrooms, broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Also streamed live on YouTube at that time, with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We'll have it in the morning.
Cup tie with